Thank you, Santosh. Hello, everyone. First of all, a great thanks to the CITYJS organizers, right, to Bhuwana and to the entire team who's been working tirelessly to get this all put together. Having conducted some conferences myself, I know how difficult a job this is. So this is, I don't take this lightly that you've put it all together so nicely and you've pulled it off. So kudos to you. And I'm going to share my screen now and I'll start the presentation. So the topic is using JS in Python. This is what the talk is going to be about. I'm ABHIRAM, Abhi can't draw on Twitter. So I'm a senior ML engineer at Online Solutions. The bio is already done. I write code and short stories. I co-organize Python meetups at Bang Pipers. It's a Bangalore-based Python user group. And I run a book club in Bangalore. Why did I stress on the fact that I run Python meetups in Bangalore? It is fully around Python, right? What I do is mostly in Python. I work using Python and R. So what am I doing in a JS conference, right? So when Bhuwana asked if I'd be interested to present in CITYJS, I was a little bit skeptical, mostly because I didn't think I knew enough to talk about JavaScript in a conference full of experts. And I still think that right now, as I'm talking, I'm pretty sure that this talk is not going to be at any level similar to what the other talks have already been at. But it is an important subject nonetheless to consider, because we are not at war in terms of languages. Sandy just said, he's excited to see the languages battle it out. I don't see it as a battle so much as a synergy. And as much as we are in our own little worlds where we try to specialize and use just one language, try to make up as much as we can using one language, and Python has given us a lot of that in spades. Like it is a versatile language. I am going to complement it a bit in a JS conference in that it is capable of doing everything from web apps to data science to machine learning and even messaging, real-time streaming, all of that, right? But it cannot be neglected. JavaScript cannot be neglected in the sense that the entire web runs on JavaScript. It is powered by JavaScript, and there are a lot of frameworks that are doing amazing work there, which we would be foolish not to be making use of, even in the Python world, even in any other language that we use. I don't think it should we should neglect the benefits of another language if they are vastly superior to something of our own areas of expertise. So the cons are that it is one more thing to learn. This is something that I was thinking about earlier this week, where a friend had said that, why do people use softwares like Stata when they can easily use Python or R? And I was thinking about this, and it felt very logical that, why don't people use Python and R? But then I realized it is one more thing for them to learn. Similarly, for someone who's a Python developer like me, JavaScript is one more thing for me to learn. If I have to make my UI a lot better and learn JavaScript in the process, that is one more thing for me to learn. But if I don't do it, all I'm left with is a moderate UI at best, and maybe I would have lost something by not going that extra mile, right? So that's where the pros come in handy. It's not a need, but it improves the overall experience considerably. And the second thing, while I was going through projects to put together for this talk, like some sample projects that I took up and pulled from the internet, basically just to go through it, because that's how you learn a new language, right? You go through what has already been done and build up as you go along. You take the most absolute basic projects, you see how it is written, and then you build components of your own, add your own little spices onto it, and that's how you learn a new language. So you should never be, afraid to explore something new. And that's what I've learned. And in that process, I learned that it helps you separate concerns between UI and business logic. I'll show you that in a bit. And it also allows for a broader usage of UI and UX capabilities. Like you have a lot of different widgets and frameworks that you can pull in if you allow for JavaScript to be part of your architecture. And now, so where can we use JavaScript in Python? So basically it is it's mostly in web apps. And when we talk about web apps, we are talking about some titans in the web app scenario in Python, where Django, Flask are the reigning kings, and Streamlit and Dash and some more Mercury, all of these small frameworks are coming into the picture, and they are throwing their hat in the ring, and they are succeeding to a large extent. And JS can also be used in Jupyter notebooks. Where they can be used is the extensions that you see in Jupyter notebooks, and I'll show you a Jupyter notebook in case you've never seen it. The extensions that you see there can be modified, or you can add your own little extensions by using JavaScript. Now, you must have already noticed that in all of these avenues, if you had known only Python, you are missing out on so much. If you didn't know JavaScript, if you don't learn it, you are completely missing out on an avenue of, like making your work easier by adding maybe one more button in a Jupyter notebook and pulling in some extra files from the cloud. There's so many possibilities. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit more in a bit. So moving forward, the typical Django app follows a model view template sort of architecture. It is not an MVC framework, it is an MVT framework, where the view is not the presentation layer, it is the business layer. So the model is where you store the data. The template becomes the view in an MVC framework, and the view is the business logic. The naming conventions are a bit weird, but this is how it is, and people who have been using Django for a while have gotten pretty used to the fact. What we don't make allowances for here is anything outside of this architecture, right? Because when we say template, we have a lot of room for adding HTML, CSS, and JavaScript here itself, and it becomes like an entire full-fledged but completely holistic model of saying UI, business logic, and everything. But it in the process, it mixes everything together. So there's no real separation. Okay, so that I'll show you just now. I'll be switching screens now, and I hope you can see the entire screen. If you can't, one of the organizers, please stop me. So can someone just pipe up and tell me if I'm audible so far? It's all right. You can tell me.
Yep.
All right, great. So I'm just going to show you the structure of the typical framework. So here I have a sample Django app, and I'll show you what it does as well. And this is the typical structure of a normal Django app. Okay, it has the application. This is the entire project. And when you spawn a new project and an application, you get a lot of things, like just cookie cut or bootstrapped right from the beginning, right? You get your views, URLs, models, all of them are there. Maybe not models, but all of them are already there to fill up. You can fill them up. The settings.py are there to configure, and the requirements.txt, it is there to let you add what all requirements are there for the Django app to function properly. And what this Django app is particularly doing is, I like to write small, tiny projects for myself. So this Django app basically generates a screen like this. Okay, it is a random Alan Watts quote generator. Alan Watts is a like a philosopher of the late 60s in the US, and he has some good quotes. You don't have to take them all seriously, but they are decent. So the point of this app is it just generates random Alan Watts quotes, and you can see that it is deployed on Heroku. Okay, now the thing to notice here, the thing of pertinence here, the thing of relevance here is that this is done completely using Django. I have not used much JavaScript here. It is using CSS and HTML. And in the balance, the entire thing has fallen into a structure like this. Within the template layer, there are 3 HTML files, and you can see they are all using something called Jinja templating. Okay, Jinja templating is our, what do you call it? It is our substitute for HTML. Okay, Jinja template is supported by Django, and this can be used to create nice little UIs. Okay, but there is a limit to what it can do. It cannot handle Ajax queries. It cannot. Basically, asynchronous communication is the bottleneck as far as this is concerned. Even there are workarounds in Django, but JavaScript can handle it a lot more elegantly. I'm not going to demo that, of course, but you'll have to take my word for it. Now I'll show you an app with a different sort of a paradigm where it is not completely only Django. The front end and the back end are completely bifurcated. Okay, so this is the structure that I just showed you. No, this is the structure here. This is the older structure, but the newer structure will look something like this. The back end and the front end are completely isolated, and the back end code will have only the business logic. Okay, and the front end code will have whatever JavaScript code that I have used here. Here I'm using a little bit of GraphQL to navigate the different paths, and I'm using Vue.js to display the UI elements. Now, bear in mind that I am new to all of this. Okay, I don't know Vue.js, I don't know React.js to the extent that a good JavaScript developer would. But in the time that I took to put this together, I've been able to pick up some stuff out of sheer necessity, right? So the point I'm getting to is, if I can do it out of necessity, someone who is a little bit more motivated should be able to do it a lot more easily and with a lot more features, right? This is going to be very basic, but you can probably do a lot more with this. Now I'll show you what this does. Now, first of all, I'll show you the code itself. This is the one. Okay, let's go from minimal to outward. So in the backend, as you can see, there is only Python specific code. When I started the application, I did not add any templates. My views also has pretty much nothing here because the view itself is delegated somewhere else. Okay, so all I have here are models. The models are basically, this is a blog application. So the end result should look something like this. Not like this. I will run it and show you. Okay, the end result is a blog application which will list the blogs and blog entries that it has taken in as input. Okay, and it has all of these fields: title, subtitle, slug. The schema is where I fill in everything that is related to graph query to resolve posts by different sort of APIs that I will need when I'm making those queries. Okay, and the queries themselves are not necessarily made via graph APIs, graph queries, but they can be made from the UI itself, because the UI in turn calls the graph APIs in the backend. Right, and finally there is an admin page, which is how I'll be adding all of these entries in the Django app. And this is the backend, right? In the front end, I have a couple of UI elements, which is what will get displayed. Where is the source? Here it is. So there is a main.js. The main.js is what is pointing to the place where the APIs are being hosted, which is localhost 8000. Okay, at the GraphQL endpoint. How GraphQL is being used here is using something called Django Graphene. Django-Graphene is the library that I'm using from Django side to serve the APIs. All right, and here I have all the components. So all of these elements is something that I picked up while learning what little view I needed for this project, right? So here I'm writing simple graph APIs to say that because I'm querying by author, the elements for this author are his bio, his website, his or her bio, website, user, and everything that is specific to the user. This is a graph query. Okay, and it is as simple as something that you would expect from a JSON structure minus the values. This is just the keys, right? So this becomes very simple. And it's very intuitive as well. That is why people prefer this as opposed to writing long URIs. Author link. Typically, every sort of this hello world is just a relic of what came with the spawning of the Node.js components. But this doesn't matter. Basically, every page that is here is to say that there is an endpoint. Whatever link you click, there is an endpoint to display the relevant details from the database. And the database here is a SQLite database. So the bifurcation of the front end and the back end is what I wanted to highlight here. And finally, when you serve it, there are two things to serve. There is again a distinction over here from the normal Django app. In a normal Django app, all you would have had to do would be to serve the Django app itself. I've done a bunch of Git pushes. Now, if you're not following along the code, right, it's fine. I've put up all of this code in my GitHub repo that I'll be making public later on. I've made it public. I'll just make it accessible. Where is this? I'm making a mistake here. Run server. It says I have one unapplied migration. That's fine because I'm not doing any authentication here anyway. This is the normal Django. And yeah, this is on my local right now. But what I'm showing here is all I had to do was run the Django app because it does not depend on anything external. But if I'm doing it via the Vue.js component, there are two things here. One is I have to start the Node.js server, and the other thing is I have to start the Django server. So both of them are in play here. Both of them are necessary. Okay, so how do I start the Django server is the same way. Python manage .py run server. And then I'll start the Node server as well. Now this will be available at localhost 8080. You see the difference here. The difference is I am not using the URL of the Django app. I'm using the URL of my Vue app. Okay, because the Django app, all I'm using it for is to serve the APIs. I'm using the Vue URL as my front end. So if you had opened the, this is the GraphQL. Yeah. This is port 8080, sorry, 8000. This is where the Django app is being served. Okay, that is it. The Django app is being served at 8000. And that is where I can access my admin at because it is a Django's admin. And I have the graph query API that is being listed here. Okay, that is also from Django. The Vue.js is coming here. Okay, it's a not so awesome blog. And I have a couple of posts here already. How do I add a new post? Right now, I don't have a UI to add new posts, so I can add it from Django. Okay, so you see all of these models over here. They are all from Django. And when I add it over here, it will be reflected here. So first thing is I'll add a post. We already have a user called Kendall. We'll add one more user. Let's call it, I don't know, we'll call it Sandy. Password will be Sandy1234. Don't use passwords like this in production. And save. What is the character? Oh my God. See, the password is too similar to username. So there are some Django constraints that are enforced readily. So that is pretty good. I'll use the reverse of Sandy. YD. Let's make it simple. Welcome. 1, 2, 3. Welcome. 1, 2, 3. What happened? Huh. Oh, the password is too common. Okay. Welco. Wow. So more time in the industry, and I've spent 10 years right now, is wasted in stuff like this. It's sad, but it's necessary. You do not take authentication lightly. Velcro post 2. As you can see, a slug is being created. A slug is a link that you can use to refer to the URL. And the body, this is the body. I am still audible, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sure. So now I don't have the user here yet. Why not? Because a profile for him was not created. So I'll create a profile for him. Sandy, save. I'm putting the time as IST now. Author is Sandy and save. Now this will not appear. And I could have asked you why if it was a live conference, but we'll have to make do here. It is because it's not published. These are things I miss about an online conference. Hopefully we'll have CITYJS 2023 live. So this is Velcro 222. If I click on this, I get welcome content. How did I get here? Via the Graph API, right? So every link is linking somewhere. It is not a dead link, right? And that is what you can really ensure using Graph APIs. So you should really get into that and check it out. So that is one full life cycle of what this how JavaScript can be used here. Now, could I not have accomplished the same thing in Django templating? Probably I could have. But now the biggest advantage I have is this complete separation. Okay. And in a small project like this, maybe it doesn't make much sense. But if you're working across teams, and you mostly are, you might want to separate the two out and say that, I'll give you my APIs, you develop the front end, and you just have to serve them. You don't have to work on the same code base. There won't be conflicts all the time. You can save a lot of unnecessary headaches by separation of these two components, which don't really need to be joined, right? And you get the additional benefit of being able to add more components if for someone who is more savvy with JavaScript, right? So all of those things are something that you can take a lot of advantage of. So now the next thing I had so much fun with this, I forgot what the next thing was, so we have achieved a couple of things here. We have separated the views and the logic. We have made it easier to interface with GraphQL. I kept calling it Graph Query. It's GraphQL. I blanked out on the last two letters. And adding new views and templating is very easy and more flexible than Jinja templating. Now, the second thing I'm going to demo is a Streamlit app. Okay, so now what is Streamlit? Now, Streamlit, I said, is one of the more recent challengers of Django and React and stuff like that. Not to the same extent, because the latter are a lot more robust and they are very mature. But you can get a lot of things done with Streamlit, and they are consistently iterating. If you follow them on Twitter, you'll see how active that team is, how friendly they are. So all of this is important. I'm going to digress just a little bit here. The biggest thing that is important to a language is not the language. Okay, it is the community. Someone spoke about the community just 2 talks back. It is very important, because if you get a problem, who are you going to go to, right? Like the documentation can take you only so far. But if you have any problems, you need someone to talk to someone to answer your queries, right? So that's where the mailing list, the Twitter handles, conferences like CITYJS and JSFoo and all of that, they make it easy for people to come together and talk about languages that they're using, problems that they're facing. It is not just a showcase platform, right? It is also to clarify doubts and meet people who are better than you in languages that you can learn from, right? So Streamlit is one of those new up and coming communities that you should leverage. So here I've made use of React, and I'll show you how the Streamlit app is. First of all, again, I'm going to follow the same sort of paradigm where I show you the code base and then we'll go to the execution, right? So the code base is very simple. For every, unlike Django, all you need is an app.py or an init.py, and everything is, a lot of components are abstracted. And it does use the component paradigm in that every element is a component. You can start with a blank slate, so to speak, a blank canvas, and add elements one on top of each other, not necessarily top of each other, but one after another, one next to each other. And you can make very nice dashboards. Okay, so for rapid prototyping, for rapid dashboarding, if you're familiar with R, then you know R Shiny, right? And if you in Python, there is Plotly dash, right? So this is an equivalent of that. So you can make quick dashboards, and here I'm going to show you one such dashboard with 2 sliders. So here what I've done is I've added 2 custom sliders with the title Hello World, and they range from 0 to 100, and their default value is 50, and they have keys called slider 1 and slider 2. Simple enough, right? But just putting this will not get them on the screen. There needs to be some sort of UI interaction that is to be done, because this is a custom slider. I'm not using any native slider application. The native slider would look something like this. Okay, and now that is what we are going to mimic. First, I'll show you the native slider. I'm going to comment all of this out, show you the native slider. And how do you run Streamlit app? Is like this. It's a lot of green. You just have to run Streamlit, run app.py. Now, I know that most of you are JavaScript developers. Maybe that assumption is wrong, but when you are using Python, make sure to do everything within virtual environment so that you don't break any of your global packages, right? So it is the equivalent of running NPM, not globally, but locally for the project, right? So similarly, you run installation of packages only within a virtual environment. And that is how Streamlit is running within CITYJS, an environment that I've created for this purpose. So this is running over here. Let's see if it runs. I don't know. Maybe it will. It is, right? It is running because there is no custom UI requirement right now. There is no dependency on the custom UI. And this is what a default slider looks like. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to make the same thing with custom elements. Now you may be like, ABHIRAM, why are you doing all this extra work when a default slider is already given? Why are you doing this? That is a legit question. But the aim here is not to demonstrate fancy sliders. It is to demonstrate how Streamlit works with UI that is using JavaScript. Right, so I'm going to mimic the same thing, but I'm going to go one step further. This slider only gives you the sort of a basic approach where you can go from 0 to a particular range. I can go one step further, and you'll see how now. So I'm going to comment this out again, and this is also it will refresh on its own. So you'll see that the UI is gone. Okay. The slider is gone. Now we'll uncomment what we did. I'll show you the UI for it. The UI is over here, and I said that I used React for this. And I didn't know React. So the only 2 things I learned are 2 hooks. Okay, I learned only 2 hooks. One of them was use effect, and the other one was where is the other one? Use state. These are the only 2 hooks I learned. Use state is use effect is for demonstrating side effects. Okay, and use state is to propagate changes, like whatever state has been generated, it is to propagate that. Now I'm sure I'm butchering the definition, but this is my understanding of it. I hope to learn more. And it will do the job right now. And what state I want to propagate is the value that I'm setting when I move the slider. Okay, that is what I'm saying use state for. And you will see that I have a min and a max value over here. And this is the slider component. And the way it is communicating with Streamlit is using, where is this? Sorry, the way Streamlit is communicating with the React Node.js component is using this init.py, where I have said that I'm going to declare a component called custom slider, and the URL to look for is localhost 3001. Okay, this is where I will be running it on. Okay, so now I'll run it. So I'm already running the Streamlit app. All I have to run is the Node.js app. I've already done all the npm installs and stuff. By the way, none of this is hidden details. All of the details are in the code, and the code is going to be public. So don't worry about it. This is just in the interest of time. So now I've hosted it. Let's come back and see if we have our two sliders. We have two sliders. So if you see, one of them actually will bring back the original slider also. So you can see the contrast. See, now you'll see that I had space only for two sliders, right? But I have just introduced a third slider. So these will get pushed down because it is just adding one component on top of another, right? So if you look at this, this is doing a sliding motion, and it is setting a value here and is showing the value here. And this is the same thing we have mimicked, except with some markers and a little bit more, like a different color and all of that. And what is not possible with the default slider is this, setting a range, right? This is the simplest, most possible way of demonstrating what you can do with a custom addition. But you get the gist of it, and you should expand on top of this. You can add other components as well. You can add maps, you can add sidebars, you can do all sorts of dashboarding, and it's a lot of fun. So this is the second app. The third app will look similar, but the difference will be in the setup. It will be in the structure. Okay, here I'll just show you the structure again so that you can notice the difference when I show you the next one. So here I've separated out this app.py and the init.py, which has two different sliders. The next one is something called Streamlit discrete slider. Okay, there is a difference in behavior as well. So here, this is a continuous slider. Okay, the values are continuous. The next one is a discrete slider, in that it will have specific markers. Like in YouTube, you must have seen chapters, right? Chapters, what are they called? Time splits, time annotations, something. So time, I forget the term, but you'll have time labels here. Okay, so that is what would be an example of discrete bars, sliders. Okay, and that is what I'm going to show you now. So I'm starting the front end and the Streamlit app for the discrete slider. I've started both of them, but I'll show you the code now. So here again, we'll start from, like inner to outer to inner. You have the discrete slider, which has the front end, and you have the init.py. The front end is separate. Okay, the front end is separate, and the init.py houses all the elements that I want to get on screen. I'm calling it a letter slider, and I have one discrete slider. This discrete slider is again a custom component. Okay, it's a custom component I've created in the front end. Here in the SRC, it is a TypeScript file, and I've created everything that I want. I've set a vertical margin for it, a horizontal margin. I've set the min and max. And I'm saying that on change committed. On change committed is when you lift this mouse pointer, the value will be set. Okay. Let me show you how it works. So it's already loaded up. Let me refresh just to make sure it's not a stale. So it snaps into place, right? Actually, there is a bug here. It did not snap into place, but the value got persisted. Okay. For some reason, this thing keeps going back. I think it is because I have not put the state here as well, as in like I should have set a state value here somewhere, but I didn't get the syntax correctly. Okay, I should fix it. But yeah, I managed to load up the state here and like get the value for whatever I'm selecting. So that is what is different in this particular Streamlit app. So that is how you can use React.js separately with the Python app. You can use Vue.js separately with the Django app, right? So that is two different use cases, but they are extrapolatable to all sorts of other applications like Flask, more robust Django apps and all of that. So yeah, Streamlit 2 demo was this thing. Let me Whoops. So in Jupyter Hub notebooks, how can you do this? For creating new extensions, I said I'd show you a Jupyter Hub notebook. For those of you who already know it, you should please bear with me. So I'll just activate a different environment because I haven't installed Jupyter Lab in this. This is coming because I'm using WSL and it can't launch a browser. Whoops. I already started a instance somewhere. That's all right. Start a new instance. So this is a Jupyter notebook, and you see this Git. This is an extension. This is an extension, Git extension that has been built using TypeScript. All right, and you can build a lot more using that. I'm not going to build one now, but I will provide the link for where you can create extensions for Jupyter Hub. Not Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Lab. Jupyter Hub is the RBAC supported version of Jupyter Lab. So this link is where it will tell you how you can use cookie cutters to create Jupyter Lab extensions in TypeScript and JavaScript, and all of this. Like we have done it for our work, at work, but it is pretty involved depending on the scale of, it can be involved depending on the scale of the extension, or it can be very tiny. Sometimes you don't even need TypeScript, all right, or JavaScript. You can just do CSS and you can modify, you can make changes over here. So, I mean, like I've done a small experiment. I'll just show you that. Forgot to put it in the slide, but. So this thing is another extension. All I needed was CSS to do this, or not this. This. I mentioned this because it is in the UI realm, but a little bit of an extension to this and it can become a kick-ass JavaScript extension as well, right? So you can do something as cool as this. Like normally all you get is a boring little this. I mean, I don't think pandas is there in this, but let's see. Oh, it is. This, you get this blue little bar, right? Or if you are in light mode, you get something a different color. It's the same blue, but if you want something different, you can you can be a little bit more playful and get your job done. So that's how you can leverage Jupyter Hub extensions using JavaScript while within Python, right? And finally, these are the references. So this realpython.com article helped me a lot for creating the Django app. You should definitely check it out. And like I said, the Streamlit community is robust. You should look for more examples to work with it, right? Regardless of how amazing you are at JavaScript, I'm sure you can always learn something in Python. So what I said about Python developers learning JavaScript also translates to every other language user learning any other language, because ultimately these are all tools. We are not at war with each other. We are collaborating and making applications for the real world or for fun, right? And finally, I'm ABHIRAM. Thank you to the CITYJS team. If I gather many of you are students,